all
We have one private conversation going on over on the left. And it is a select board member, so I would, hopefully that person. Kelly? We're starting. I hate to call you out on it, but. So, welcome everybody. I appreciate you very much coming to, what is this, number 18? Or the Tri-Town Leadership Meeting. I want to just go through some things quickly, and we'll. I have to look at this keyboard. I'm not familiar with a Mac, and they just don't work. There we go. So the first thing I wanted to do is to introduce the. It says judges, but it looks like a bunch of judges or lawyers. But I wanted to introduce everybody here sitting at the table. So we can start with you, John, and go around. And I do know there's some planning commission members and any DRB members around the audience. Please introduce yourself. John.
John Hogenboom, Moortown Select Board.
Luke Umel, Warren Select Board.
Andy Cunningham, Warren Select Board.
Jared Cadwell, Facein Select Board.
Hi, Randy Graves, Warren Select Board.
Chuck Martell, Facein Select Board.
Kelly Mazer, Waitsfield Select Board.
Daryl Forrest, Waitsfield Select Board. John Jameson, Waitsfield Select Board.
Dan, I'll start with you in the very back and then find some planning commission members.
Dan Maddox, Warren, PC, and MRV.
John Simonini, Facein PC, and
Jim?
Jim Sanford, Planning Commission.
Alice?
Alice Peel, Waitsfield Planning Commission, and I'm on the Transportation Advisory Committee. Thank you, Darrell.
Carl Klein, Facein PC and Mad River Valley Housing Coalition.
Bob, you're still around, right?
Bob Brooks, Waitsfield Planning Commission.
Anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Oh, I'm sorry.
John Quackenbush, Duxbury Planning.
John, I'm embarrassed. I should have seen you there. I'm sorry. Carl, I wanted to just introduce Carl Klein, who has stepped up to take a sort of very unrewarding job, I think, but he's doing a great job, which is to be chair of the Mad River Valley Housing Coalition, which is subject to debate, I realize, by a lot of you, that we do have a housing problem within the country, and we have one in Vermont, we have one in Washington County, and that means we have one in the Mad River Valley. I think there's a number of us who are not prepared to put our head in the sand relative to housing and to really try and do something about it. It's very challenging, but we are attempting to do so. And along with that, I'd like to introduce Keziah Havlin Montgomery, who is a new person to the Valley, who is going to work with the Housing Coalition and brings a tremendous amount of experience working with housing in the country, in different areas. Most recently, she's worked on a reservation in the Dakotas, really trying to bring a lot of, and she did bring a lot of housing to an Indian reservation, which, for those of you who have any knowledge of reservations, it's a fairly challenging dynamic to work in. So, welcome, Keziah. Thank you. So, to keep this in line with being a public meeting, I've got to ask the question, is there any public comment that anybody would like to make? And if there is so, we would limit it to a minute and try and keep the number down, because we have a very tight agenda tonight. So, any public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on. So this is our agenda for the evening. We're going to hear from the Transit Authority, Ridge to River. Wynn is going to give us an update as to the transaction of the year that's happened here in the Valley, which would be great. I don't know how many of you attended last night's community visit at Sugarbush, but it was great. We're going to get into some data. We're going to hear from the rec district, and we're going to hear from the planning district, and we're going to have some discussion at the end, if we have time. We were to have a presentation tonight on a housing demand study that the 3 towns in the planning district did contract for. Unfortunately, the company that we hired, the principal of that company, suffered from Lyme disease this summer, and I've never heard of this, but people have told me they've heard of it. Well, he was basically incapacitated for a time and in the hospital, not knowing where he was. So consequently, that study has been delayed. It will be out sometime in mid-December. And our plan to go forward with housing is to hold a summit sometime in the late winter, early spring, working with the Housing Coalition that would present that study, present the findings, and the Housing Coalition would present what can be done here in the Valley to advance the housing situation. So that's just a heads up. So a lot of you come to these meetings, and I don't know why you come. I always like to ask why. Why do I do anything? What's my reasoning for it? And you know, if you can figure that out, then you're one step ahead of knowing where you're going and how you're going to get there, and sort of what the meaning of what you're doing is, rather than trying to say, well, let's do this, and then looking back and say, well, why did I do that? Look at the why first. So my question to you tonight is make sure when you leave here, you know why you've been here for the evening, okay? And in that context, I did want to share with you a vision that exists for the Valley. A lot of people have probably not seen this. A lot of people created it, though, so that's sort of a contradiction. But this is the framework of which the Mad River Valley Planning District works under. And forgive me, I'm going to read it. Mad River Valley is an innovative, vibrant, connected, and caring community, hoping its past, celebrating its landscape, and actively pursuing its potential. Our vision is to be a welcoming community that builds a healthy and sustainable environment, support the historic settlement pattern of vibrant villages surrounded by rural countryside, identify and promote the Valley's historic and cultural heritage, promote and maintain a diverse economy that supports existing business and attracts new ones, enhance the Valley's year-round recreational opportunities, invest in a safe, environmental friendly, efficient, and integrated transportation network, provide access to safe, affordable, and energy efficient housing for current and prospective residents, and steward and sustainable use the Valley's natural resources and environmental quality for the benefit of future generations. So again, it's a lot to keep under your hat, but bear in mind that's on the website for the Planning District if you want to refer to it anywhere down the road, but that's how the Planning District operates. That's the guidelines by which it tries to go forward, and it looks at everything that it does. So what are we? We 3 towns here, or are we a community? Okay, everybody looks at me and laughs and says, okay. Anybody who knows me that I'm a really strong advocate of a community, not 3 towns. I advocate for it constantly, and I think it is, because it's the reality of who we are. We've got 3 historic towns, and the 4th in Moortown as well. And sorry, John, I didn't put that up here. This was from a prior presentation. But we've got Fayston, Waitsfield, and Warren. And you know, none of those would exist as they are today without the other towns. If you didn't have the other towns, you wouldn't have the community you have now. So at some point, we all have to get together collectively and recognize that the Valley is the #1 driving force and is sort of the community we have to be paying attention to. And to reiterate that, if we look at this ecosystem of the Valley, these are all the components of it. Some of these components don't exist in certain towns, i.e. Fayston. I mean, Fayston doesn't have a shopping center, doesn't have as much commercial vibrancy as Waitsfield does. Excuse me. Waitsfield doesn't have some of the geographic attributes that Fayston has or Warren has. So you've got all these different components, whether it be, you know, the education system, the investment of the people investing in their the community, construction, infrastructure projects, housing, Education, as I said, recreational. So it's all these components combined make up the community that we live in. And so that's the end of my pitch. So I hope that you'll look at everything from a community perspective tonight as we look forward to it. And we're going to go next to talk about one of the factors that we need, and that is transportation. And I'll introduce Jamie White from Green Mountain Transit.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm just going to give a basic overview of the transportation services that we offer in the Valley, starting with our E&D services. Then we'll move on to the seasonal bus service, talk about an overview of what that service looks like, changes last year, this year, our partnership with Sugarbush and the Planning District, and then our funding model for the future. So GMT provides elderly and disabled services in the Valley for passengers that are 60 years or under. That is through a program we have called Ticket to Ride. Essentially, folks qualify by contacting GMT, letting us know that there's a mobility issue that prevents you from riding a regular fixed route service. And they are allotted a certain amount of money per year to use for trips to the store, pharmacy, doctor's appointments, whatever they need to do. And then for folks over 60 years, E&D services provided by the Council on Aging. Both of these programs are grant funded, and currently there's no contribution from towns who utilize these services. This is an overview of, it's hard to see out this screen because it's pretty light, but Medicaid rides and E&D trips per town. I included Moortown and Duxbury in this. You can see that there's quite a few E&D trips taken. The FY20 data is to date. The complete year this will go through June 30th, so there's still 6 months worth of data that will be added to this bottom screen. The seasonal bus service is where we focus most of our energies. We have 5 routes, 4 of which operate daily bus service. One operates evening service on Saturdays and during select holiday periods. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm sure you're familiar. Valley Floor, Mount Ellen, Condos, Access Road, and then the Valley Evening Service. Changes to the service this year. We have last year we experimented with some changed routing and some new things, and this year we have returned to a more historic service model. We did eliminate a portion of Town Hill Road, but we are pulling directly into the health center this year, and thanks to a suggestion from Alice, we have some new routing through Mad River Valley Shops, which will provide direct access from the senior center to the health center. There is no on-site dispatch at Sugarbush this year, which means all of the routes are operating on a fixed route. There's no demand response. People can't call anytime they need a ride. It's just operating on a daily schedule. That's the same holds true for the Valley Evening Service this year. Traditionally, that's been a call, I want a ride, bus comes within half an hour, sometimes longer, depending on how busy they are, and will take you to whatever destination you need to go. Now it's operating on a fixed loop. There's a pretty set schedule, so folks can sort of determine where and when to catch the bus. We did implement a fare on the Valley Evening Service this year. It's $3 for a one-way trip, $5 for an unlimited evening trip, and there is an option to purchase a season pass if folks want to do that. And to make all transportation easier, we are launching Transit app, which is a bus tracking app. At any point, you should be able to just pick up your phone, see when the next bus is going to reach your stop. In addition to on your phone, we'll have stop IDs at most every bus stop in the Valley, and folks can just call and in real time hear, a bus will arrive at your current stop in 5 minutes, which will, I think, help folks feel confident taking the bus. In addition to Transit app, we are launching Token Transit, which is an app that folks can use to pay their bus fare for the Valley Evening Service. Moving forward to our partners, GMT works very closely with the Planning District and Sugarbush to plan the seasonal service. We are on the Transportation Advisory Committee, so we do participate in those meetings. And most of the service planning happens at those TAC meetings, offering any other local business or partner like the chamber to come in and weigh in on the changes for the season. So our current funding model. The current funding model in our rural system is flawed, and that's probably a little bit of an understatement. It relies very heavily on census data and not on actual service that we provide in each individual location. It doesn't factor in capital match for vehicles, and it doesn't factor in overhead costs of the organization, so staff. The goal for GMT is eventually to get everybody's local contribution to 20% local match. Most everybody in our rural location is well below 20% local match, so we've started this year an education process to sort of get folks up to speed. We're working on a new funding model moving forward to more accurately capture what those costs should be. Part of the process to request additional funding, as everybody knows, is a petitioning process. We don't have a very large staff, so some of those petitioning requirements are hard for us to achieve. This is hard to see up here.
Can I just clarify that?
Sure.
Is that just for the Valley bus service, or does that include E&D and?
It's just to ask for an increase for the bus service,
The
yes.
bus service,
Mhm.
okay.
So this funding, this is a piece that we developed, an education piece, letting folks know what our current funding model is, where we have service, the services we provide. It's hard to see up here, but I do have copies on the table in the back if anybody wants to take a closer look at that. Most every town has received this along with a letter. What's next for Green Mountain Transit? So we recently hired a new community relations and public affairs manager. Her name is Jen Wood. Likely she will start rounds trying to meet with select boards in the coming year to talk about current funding levels, future funding levels. Her role is really to educate and meet and build relationships. The goal for us is that most every town will include us in their general budget instead of having us petition and ask. The funding that we receive is really in kind. It's not required of any town. So we're hoping by meeting with select boards that folks will feel good about keeping transit services in their area. They'll put us in their budget. Another thing that I think Jen is really spending a lot of time on is letting folks know, most areas don't know that GMT is a municipality. And in some cases, that would exempt us from the petitioning process. So it's really just, we're in this education phase. In addition to that, we're working on a service guidelines document, which will guide all of our future decisions. It's not a secret. Green Mountain Transit has a bit of a budget situation happening. We're moving into our second fiscal year with a deficit. And so we are really, digging deep, looking at peer organizations and trying to find a rural funding model that will help us be more financially stable in the future. So that's it. If any-
We have a little bit of time if there's any questions
Yeah.
for Jamie right now.
Do you want me to make my little statement?
If you'd like to.
Okay. I just wanted to add something to this. First, kudos to Green Mountain Transit. They are always at the TAC meeting, Transportation Advisory Committee. If Jamie's not there, other representatives are there. And we have this really good guy this year. I really like him. His name is Tom Hale, right? Barnes, Tom Barnes. Tom Barnes is the manager of the bus drivers. And it was him who got together and rode the bus route and the bus route changes that actually my husband and I came up with over the summer as we were riding around saying, I don't get why they can't include a stop more convenient for the seniors by Northfield Savings Bank and then continue and include the Mad River Green shops. So there's two wins in this. The Valley Floor Service now serves the entire Valley Floor Business District. So it doesn't just go to the Village Square side. It now is going to pick up all, it's going to have a stop at the Northfield Savings Bank. It will go in past Three Mountain Cafe, and there'll be a stop at the Taste Place. Tom is also going to all the individual business owners to tell them about the bus stops and where they can tell their patrons where they can get a bus, and giving out the schedules. So a little method, and there's a lot of volunteers, and I really want to give kudos to Margot, who did yeoman's work getting the bus schedule set and straightened down and revised, and she used a lot of highlighters to do it. And the stop for the Mad River Valley Health Center is a big one. So it's just cutting out the loop road, and the terminus will be at the Mad River Health Center. And you'll see, if you just start looking around, you're going to see bus signs up everywhere. By Yes Tomorrow, we've got one, and this is the question, the Carroll Road bus sign, okay? Does the bus turn into Carroll Road? No. Okay, but the bus sign is positioned where the boardwalk is. So we need to know.
That was the closest location.
Yeah, but then the question is, can there be one on the other side of the road once we get that crosswalk in?
That would be a great discussion for next year.
Okay.
The timing of it.
Well, Tom will put it in for me.
I'm saying the crosswalk is next.
Yeah, the crosswalk, but we can get a bus stop up, a sign up, I'm pretty sure. And so the whole idea here, method to my madness, is if we can get some ridership up on this bus service, and we're going to do some exciting things like ride the bus and get a free coffee at Three Mountain Cafe, little things like that. If we can get the ridership up, then we can have a couple of chips that even with the limited budget, we can go back to the state agencies, to GMT and VTrans, and see what expanded services we can get. That's how I'm going to work it anyhow.
I just had one clarification. When you were going over the E&D service, you said that the towns don't contribute, but I believe they do currently contribute around $1,000.
The towns do contribute. We don't call that E&D funding. The E&D program is actually a grant-funded program.
Okay.
So it just gets applied to the fixed route service in those areas. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess, can I make one other point? Just one point I would like to make. So currently the Mad River Valley is providing approximately 30% of the local match to operate the system, the service, the winter seasonal service. And of that local match, Sugarbush contributes 80%. So we definitely have some skin in the game, and really value the service that GMT provides. They are the professional transportation providers, and we could not do it to the scale that they are doing it for the dollars that we're putting in. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, sorry, just one last thing. So the little
little inset boxes showing where the service is going in Mad River Green and the Village Square. And the bus actually does that loop twice an hour on each trip on the valley floor. So
It's hard to
that's
see, but we also have bus mapping guides over on the table, so if folks
that's
want to get
gonna
a closer
be-
look.
That's gonna be awesome for our seniors and for other transit-dependent folks that are trying to go to the grocery store or the health center or the drugstore.
You'll get to
Or Mad
Shaw's.
Taco.
Yes, and
Oh.
you'll get to Shaw's and
Yeah.
you'll get close enough to the stadium.
Right. I'll also add that my business card is on the back table as well, if anybody has any individual questions. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the whole meeting, so. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to transition. So Corey will be next. That one disappear.
Josh, will all these slides be available online?
Yes, we will be putting all of these on the Plain District website. There's an agenda section. We'll figure out exactly the right way to do it, most likely in the agenda section of the website. I also have this if you
Oh, yes. For this?
that doesn't fit in here, so you got a wire mic on the stand.
I'll just try this. Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Miller. I'm the director at Friends of the Mad River, and this, I was thinking back, is the 5th year I've presented here about Ridge to River. So that reminded me to chide Bob a little. Not 3 towns, not 4 towns, 5 towns that some of us consider to be in this watershed and this valley. So I see some Duxbury and Moortown folks here. Thank you for coming. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so if you've seen me present before, you know I don't love a microphone because it means I can't gesticulate with my hands and go crazy. So I am here representing Friends of the Mad River, who has been leading a Ridge to River task force for the last 5 years, and there are many people here in this room tonight who have helped participate in the Ridge to River task force. So can you all raise your hand? Okay, great, thank you. So I'm representing the work of not just Friends of the Mad River, but our partners and these 5 communities and all the volunteers who have been participating. So we, in 2015, got a group of people together to go to the Leahy Environmental Summit, and those folks were thinking a lot about the quality of life here in the Mad River Valley. We were thinking about the vistas and the views and the recreation that we have here in all seasons, some of our local food economy, and that's the last important one. We were unfortunately reflecting on some of the concerns that we had post-Tropical Storm Irene and some of the damages that our community suffered from this big climate event. But also we were experiencing more regular events. The most recent one, whoa, that moves. Being on Halloween this year, where we had a lot of rain in one small period of time and a lot of roads washed out, a lot of damages to people's driveways, to town roads, to all sorts of infrastructure, not to mention very dirty swim holes. Not that anyone would have been swimming on October 31st. But those folks went to this summit. They decided that they could take the future of this valley in that respect into their own hands and reduce our vulnerabilities as a community by thinking about one thing. And it's not that fun to think about, but in reality, it's really important. So the idea is that if we can slow the runoff down that's running off the landscape before it reaches our really flashy, narrow valleys, then we can have, we can, as a community, be less vulnerable in those big events. We can reduce those infrastructure maintenance costs, all that happen sort of more with those regular events. And we have cleaner swim holes and a more vibrant community to attract people and residents too. So there's lots of benefits. This is just the list of people who are currently involved. All 5 towns in the watershed, like I said, and various other interested community members and partners. And we paid several researchers and consultants to help us do what we were doing and learning, which is what I'm about to share with you. So I'm going to go fast through this because I want to get to the part that happened this past year. This is just sort of for the new folks in the room. So we learned some things, and I'm just going to say one thing we learned is that people actually care. We did a lot of summits. We did 2 summits. We did some surveys. We did a lot of talking with people, and people said that they care about the clean water. They care about the community. They're worried about climate change, and that they want to protect our budgets and our really valuable environment. We learned we have a lot of roads, and roads are an avenue for runoff very quickly into those steep mountain streams and can cause flooding. And 33% of those roads are private. So you might think, oh, the roads are just handled by the towns, but in fact, 33% of that road network is actually held in private hands. We learned that between the years 2001 and 2011, this watershed lost 500 acres of forest cover. So that was just forest cover that has been downgraded to herbaceous. We don't know exactly why, but we do also know from research that when you reach below 65% forest cover in a specific watershed, that downstream suffers. So there is instability downstream that affects infrastructure, affects anything where sort of the environment intersects with human settlement. And when we interviewed people and asked them what they think, and the people in town government, people who were on the ground watching these things, they said they think that much of this forest cover loss is due to small land disturbances, like view clearing and sort of adding an extra driveway or another turnaround, or just clearing your back lawn for more acreage. We also did some studies thinking about development patterns and zoning regulations, and we learned that most Mad River Valley development falls under the state permitting thresholds. So essentially, it's 1 and 2 family structures, which means that it doesn't trigger those state standards. We also learned that locally, there are very good regulations, but mostly as it comes to stormwater, they're really tackling what's happening during construction, and there's not a consideration for what happens over the longer term. So you might see these silt fences while something is being built, but we're not really accounting as a community for what's happening over the long term as some of these wooded forest cover places are turning to driveway or to lawn. So you've seen this slide before perhaps, but the moral of the story that we sort of piecing all this together, we did research for 2 years as a 5-town task force. What we really sort of put together out of this is that we have these small dispersed challenges that are happening across the landscape, like these minor land disturbances, roads, things that are happening sort of across the way. They can cause a lot of damage, but the solution can be small dispersed actions across the landscape. So we created this action framework, which you can find on the internet at that website, not so easy to remember. But the framework identifies just actions all over the community that can be done. And I'm going to highlight some things that have been done recently, just to share it with you what's changed since our last conversation. So we focused in several areas. One is development. So how can our developed areas that were built on the landscape, maybe before we knew how water would affect our resilience, and how the climate was changing to have this water be happening more and more regularly and more in a more problematic way. So we looked at these places and did what the state is calling stormwater master plans. It's not very, again, it doesn't sound that fun, but you essentially look at a property that's developed and you say, where are there opportunities to sink the water into the ground? Like, where can we look at this and make a fix? And we did those at the Mad River Glen parking lot, the Warren School, the Fayston School, Harwood Union School, and Fuller Hill Road in Warren. And made some changes. You can see over here, the Warren School did put some stormwater chambers underneath the parking lot and constructed a rain garden. This is their Fuller Hill Road dry well system, which is kind of an exciting sort of new way to look to where it's a little bit of an experiment. I think the town of Warren knows this, to figure out if this will work. And so far, there have been a few fixes to it, but it's held the water from like rushing across the bottom of the street down into the river, which is a really different situation than it has been in the past, if you know that road. This is the Harwood Rain Garden with a ton of monarch butterflies. And, oops, that's the same slide. So this past year, though, we wrapped up 25, or actually 28, 30% designs across the whole town. So many of you know this because you participated in these stakeholder meetings where each town sort of identified 5 top priority sites within the town. And these just are the partners. And we had all these stakeholders in the room for those conversations. So like I said, 30% designs for each town were an outcome, plus 3 for Mount Ellen. And so we essentially have 28 30% designs. And this is kind of an example in Waitsfield of what that looks like in that process. But essentially, it started in Waitsfield with 54 sites that were identified from a GIS computer assessment analysis by the consultants. And they then went to those sites and identified which ones were actual opportunities for sinking in water to the ground, into the ground. They found the top 20. Actually, they first identified 30-something, and then the stakeholder group chose the top 20. And within that, they prioritized the top 5 projects. So that group of stakeholders really worked with each other to figure out what that community's priorities were. And then for each of those priorities, we did a 30% design that you all now have as a community to advance. And there's grant funding that's definitely available that I've been communicating to folks about that exists to advance these plans. And that's kind of what they look like at this point. But it's a 30% conceptual design, which just means that it has a general cost estimate, it has a general idea of what permits will be required, it has worked with you as stakeholders to identify, and the landowners to identify what might need to be done and what the best solution might be. So moving away from those developed areas and the stormwater master plans and the implementation on those sites to what we've done as a sort of to help municipalities be more storm smart. And the main thing that I point to here is the road roundtables, which many of the select board members from, I can't see that, what, is it 5? Okay, thanks. I knew it meant something, but about time. So the road roundtables are an opportunity where the select board members from Ridge to River interact with the road crews from all 5 towns. And it's been a really amazing experience to be in those meetings. And I think, I see Jared shaking his head, I think that they agree that there's just been a great sharing of information between the select boards about what the constraints the select boards have and the road crews about what challenges that they have. So to date, I think the count that we've had are 7 of those, usually with 15 to 25 people at each of them. And, oh yeah, the next one's in December, hopefully. Here's some quotes, I will have to read them. Now we're seeing select board members come out and see what the problems are, and we've never seen that before. They can help give us the tools that we need. We're not competitors. We're all part of taking care of this valley. You and the other crews need something, we'll help. And there's been a lot of learning up the ladder to the select boards, and we've developed a lot more trust in the road crews from these meetings. So I think it's been just a really good sharing of learning back and forth between the road crews and the select boards, and given those folks an opportunity to learn what they're each struggling with, and that's been helpful. So the Storm Smart program that we hope you've heard about, that Friends of the Mad River is running, is an opportunity to work with homeowners at their home sites and their driveways to engage them in how to do those small fixes on their properties that can collectively add up to big fixes across the landscape. So basically all that this consists of is a home site visit, an assessment of the property, and these, what we're calling prescriptions, where the homeowner is given, it's kind of like an energy audit, like here's the things you can do on your property to reduce runoff. And it prioritizes things that seem feasible to people and helps them get resources if they're like sort of outside of their realm. So here's the simple concept. We just did this drawing, so hopefully it can help. So this is a normal property in the Mad River Valley, and if you add small fixes like what we call best management plans or green stormwater infrastructure like water bars, rain gardens, then it can look more like this. And then, then the runoff is able to sink into the ground and the property is a sponge. So that's just to help us all visualize. So we have, since 2018, done 68 home site assessments. I'm sorry, 65. There are 3 scheduled. 17 homeowners have implemented some of those best management practices. This top picture is a person in Waitsfield who reduced his driveway size, and you can see the machinery there, and did a rain garden planting. And we've had lots of community outreach, which is why I said I hope you've heard about the program. I realize many people still haven't, but there have been a lot of articles in the paper. We've done a lot of Front Porch Forum and Facebook posts, and we're trying to get out and get the word around that this is a free opportunity to people in the community. So this is one other quote about the program. What a great program. We got the expert advice we were looking for, along with follow-up visits for feedback and to help us implement solutions. It's a win-win for the river and anyone with a driveway. So I think we all have driveways. Another project that we're working on is in that realm of private homes and driveways, except it's dealing with private roads. And I don't know if folks, I think the people sitting over here, and probably most of you understand how big of a situation we have with private driveways in this watershed, where many of them don't have homeowner associations and have many people living along one network that sometimes don't even talk to each other. We also have this kind of slope situation with some of those driveways where there's a serious runoff erosion issue that is sort of deferred maintenance again and again. So we have been trying to figure out how to crack this nut and how to work with these multiple landowners to address problems on these private driveways. And we have we have 6 engineering plans and 3 different neighborhoods that we've been trying to advance. And I just want to close with since 2015, the Ridge to River Initiative has worked with projects that have brought a total of $750,000 into this watershed for support of resilience and clean water efforts. So I think it's pretty monumental, the work these folks have done, and small things add up. So anybody have questions? I think, do I have 1 minute or? Sure. No? Maybe no questions. You guys want to say anything from the Ridge to River perspective?
I think you said it all. I have to say from my own perspective, and I think your slide, it's been eye-opening, and so somehow we just have to keep plugging along and keeping the work going.
Yeah, it's a long road to tow. And I forgot, I wanted to, I'll write it down and I'll give it to you. You can call Friends of the Mad Rivers phone number, which is 496-9127. Our staff person that's working on it is Ira Shaddis. And I just want to put a quick plug in. Friends of the Mad River is celebrating our 30th anniversary next year. And in so doing, we don't have the sort of agenda for all of this yet, but we're trying to engage this community in conversations around climate and how we can be resilient in a changing climate. So we hope you'll participate as that unfolds. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to make a quick switch, and Wynn Smith is going to talk about Sugarbush. Thank you, Wynn. I just to have something behind you.
It's not a very colorful slide.
I know.
The mountain looks a lot better than that. We're actually opening tomorrow for pass holders and for the public on Saturday. So it's actually going to be a good start. Thanks to the cold weather, we have, I think for the first time in a long time, terrain for beginners, intermediates, and advanced skiers. So that is really terrific. So we're hoping to get a lot of new people on the slopes. Anyway, I think in the last week I've spoken a lot about this. A lot of familiar faces were at the forum last night, so I apologize for those who have heard this, but I think not everybody has. So I'll just really be quick and give you an overview and leave a few moments for questions. I think the most important thing a responsible owner or CEO of a company can do is to really ensure the future sustainability of an organization and also to identify the next leadership. And I think that's a responsibility you take very, very seriously. Especially when you're Sugarbush at a community like this, where you're the largest employer, you're the largest taxpayer, you're one of the largest in Washington County, and you realize that the economy of the community really relies on the sustainability of an organization. So I take that very seriously because I've seen it happen poorly. My former employee did not have a good transition and almost went out of business, and I saw the devastating impact that had on thousands of people. Over the last 18 years, we've built an organization that really was not sustainable 18 years ago. When Bob and I and Tom McHugh and Joe Reamer took it over, we saw a wonderful company that had started in 1958 but had fallen in some hard times and was really going downhill and could have gone out of business. So 18 years later, I'm really proud that we now have an organization that is sustainable currently. It's doing well. We're really close to the top of our game. We had a record year last year, and I feel very good about that. So I guess the first question you say is, if that's the case, why are you selling? Well, I've also seen, in my experience, a lot of companies who are at the top of their game who fail to recognize trends and very shortly were at the bottom of their game and out of business. And you can think of a lot of names. So think of Kodak as an example. Kodak was probably one of the best investments there were, and a few years later recognized that they failed to recognize digital technology, and they were gone. So in the industry, I've seen a few trends develop, and I think they really have caused me to reflect on what's the right thing for Sugarbush. The first thing is the consolidation that's happening in the industry. It started probably a decade ago or longer with Vail, when they introduced really a relatively innovative concept called the Epic Pass, where people could actually buy a pass very cheap and ski at multiple resorts. People were looking at how to compete against that, and then 2 years ago, a new company called Alterra Mountain Company was formed, and really has created a sea change in the industry. They're the first big competitor to Vail. So currently, before us, they owned 14 resorts, and they were partnering with 27 other resorts around North America. We actually partnered with them last year, and the way it worked is if somebody had an Icon Pass and they skied at Sugarbush, they paid us a per diem. And it worked very well. It really was very successful. There are actually a couple of other big players in the industry that people don't know as well. One is called Powder Corporation, and it owns in our backyard Killington. It owns out west mountains like Copper and Eldora. The same family owns Snowbird in Utah, the Cummins family. And then there's a fourth called Boyne that started in Michigan years ago. They own Big Sky in Montana, and in New England they own Sugarloaf and Sunday River and Loon Mountain. So you look around and you say, who were the independents left? Well, of the independents that had more than 250,000 skiers, Chris Diamond, who just recently wrote a book called Ski 2020, said the only three that he thinks exist were Sugarbush, Waterville, and New Hampshire. And he mentioned Jay Peak, but I'm not sure they're actually at that level. So there weren't many independents at that level. And that's creating some challenges, I think, for us in the future to be sustainable, because these multi-resort passes are a great deal. The Epic Pass now allows somebody to ski at Stowe about half of what they could ski at Stowe 3 years ago, and also ski at the other 37 resorts that Vail owns. So this summer, when I saw Vail purchase Peaks, it was kind of the tipping point of my thinking, because now we were pretty much surrounded all around by the multi-resorts. And I felt it was going to be increasingly difficult for us to go it alone. Could we partner as we did with Icon last year? Possibly. But it's not guaranteed that they would want to continue that partnership or they'd even continue it on the same terms. The second trend that I've seen was talked about tonight, and that's really climate change. And I think it's almost better, paraphrasing from somebody I know very well at Alterra, to refer to it more as a climate crisis. So far, we haven't seen a shorter season. Last winter, we had average snowfall, about 250 inches. The prior year, we had the second highest snowfall ever. So you could say, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the trends are showing that there's going to be growing impact on our business and the snow sport industry. And we don't want to be left behind. We don't want to be anticipating. We want to get ahead of the curve. And what that's going to take is additional capital. We have decent snowmaking today. We're putting about 4,000 gallons of water out on the mountain per minute over at Lincoln Peak, which is significantly larger than a number of years ago. But I think we want to anticipate that we should be putting out 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 to take advantage of what we believe are going to be shorter windows of opportunity where there's good snowmaking temperature. Maybe that won't happen, but I don't want to bet that that isn't going to happen. I want to be prepared so that we're sustainable. And the third thing is that Vermont is a tough business cost-wise to do business in. We face some challenges that other states don't have. We have a higher cost structure, and that's the given reality. You know, we love Vermont, they're wonderful things, but it is more expensive to do business here, and that creates a competitive disadvantage with competitors in other states. So by being part of a larger organization, one, we think that we're being part of the consolidation in a positive way and not threatened by it. We think we're going to have a partner that has some additional capital that can help us mitigate and anticipate the investments we have to make for climate change. And secondly, we can see some efficiencies in purchasing power, in other things like that. Purchasing power, a good example, today we bought a new winch groomer. It cost us $480,000. A few years ago, that was close to $300,000. So when we go to negotiate with the oligopolies of Piston Bully and Prenoc, there are only two suppliers. We have no negotiating power. If Alterra is buying 14 groomers, one for every resort, they can buy them in 10, 15% less. That's actually real money that can be invested more productively. So those are the advantages of, I think, being part of an organization. But why Alterra? We've had offers to sell in the past, and I have not thought it was either the right time or they were the right person. Today, if you got your news briefing, you would say that Vail announced that they were laying off 84 people with their recent acquisition of Peaks. I wouldn't want to sell it to somebody to have that happen in the Mad River Valley. So Alterra has a different approach. What they're attempting to do is build what they call a family, and they use that word, a family of iconic destinations. And they want those destinations to retain their brand, their identity, their values, their culture, and importantly, their support to the local communities. And they realize each of their resorts reside in communities that are individualistic. They're not trying to homogenize it. They're not trying to bring everything into one consolidated organization. I found that their values were very similar to ours. I also found that the people running them are skiers and riders. The CEO, Rusty Gregory, started as a lift operator at Mammoth. He worked as a lift mechanic, he worked in construction, he worked as a financial analyst, he worked in HR. You know, he's been very environmentally responsible. He's been chair of the National Ski Area Association. So he is very much like what our team at Sugarbush is, passionate about the sport, invested in the community. And Mammoth for years was as independent as you could find of any ski resort. So he understands the value of being independent. Now that he's part of an organization that is a collection of 14 different and soon to be 15 different resorts. When I started my conversations with him, before I wanted to get into even negotiations, I asked him 17 questions about their mission, about how they're going to treat their guests and how they're going to treat their employees. And they came back, and I didn't ask for it, but they gave it to me in writing, which I thought was pretty impressive. And I asked him questions like, does our mission have to change? And our why is to create a culture or lifelong spirit of adventure and camaraderie, to cultivate a spirit of lifelong adventure and camaraderie. They said no. I said our 7 values, one of which is commitment to the community here, have to change. They said no. So all those questions were answered in a satisfactory fashion, which gave me confidence that they would be the right partner. And so now what's changing? Well, clearly ownership. As of January 7th, I won't be the owner anymore. In many ways, I view it as a recapitalization, because I am going to stay as the president. I didn't ask for that. They asked if I would stay, and I'm really excited too, because I'm not ready to retire. I still love this job too much. I'm having too much fun, and I love this community. I'm going to stay as long as I feel it's good, because I also want to create upward mobility for our employees, and I'm hoping that my successor is actually coming from this community. That would be my goal, and I think would be their goal as well. But to create enough of a continuity and transition so it goes well. What's also not changing is none of our employees. You're not going to read about 84 people getting laid off. My entire management team is staying exactly in their same positions, and all of our employees who are in good standing are as well. their goal is not to parachute people in. Their goal is to give us help and add to our resources and add to our strength, but not run our company. And that I clearly like. As I said, they're not changing our mission, our values, our culture, our brand. And importantly, we've talked to them about what we represent to the Mad River Valley, what this community is, and they're fully supportive of that as well. What's going to change this year? Again, not a lot. Our pass products are the same. If you bought a Sugarbush pass, it's exactly the same. Icon pass holders this year will not have unlimited visitations. They'll still have the 5 or 7 days they had last year. So essentially everything that worked last year works this year. Now in the future, that's going to change. We certainly will be offering the Icon Pass. That's going to be of a benefit to many pass holders. But I think it's likely, too, we'll still have some of our own unique products, which have been really successful. You know, I can't commit to the boomers today that there's going to be a boomer pass next year, and they're the ones that asked all the questions first of all. But, you know, if it's logical, I think Alterra is going to be very open to doing the right thing. I have to get Rusty's quote correct yesterday. He has it on his little card. And he said, rules can be broken when there's common sense to overrule them. And I think that's an attitude which is very refreshing. So I think you are going to see our Icon Pass and maybe some of our local passes continue. But we're not going to decide it until we get into our pass campaign. And we certainly aren't going to announce it publicly to the competitors until we're ready to launch. But I believe that's the direction we're going. I'd sort of end with saying I think the most difficult conversations I've had, and I will say I've been very pleased and gratified by the number of very nice compliments and congratulations I've had by email and person. And I think overall people have been very supportive of what we're doing because they understand that change is never easy, but change happens. And if you find the right person to carry on what I think is very special, then I think it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So the Kenny Rogers, you know, song that goes, you've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. Well, in my last job, I knew it was time to run like hell and come up here to the Mad River Valley. But in this case, you know, I'm folding them, but I'm staying in the game. And I plan to remain every bit as committed to the Valley as I have been these last 18 years. So let me stop there. And again, I apologize to the people that have heard the story now, but for those of you that haven't, maybe you have some questions as well. Yes?
One quick one, and I know you can't predict the future, but, and I know it's not apples to apples, the Sugarbush situation with the Stowe situation, but I think what a lot of people are concerned about is having with Stowe, with their bail pass, all of a sudden it's a traffic jam last winter to get up there. Do you anticipate?
Great question. The question was, go on Stowe, look at all the traffic jams, look at all the crowds. That's true, but also Stowe was crowded before. It's maybe more crowded now. I think we have a couple of differences, and I don't take that lightly because we do want to grow the business. You know, I think last year we grew the business largely because of the Icon partnership. I think what benefited not just us, I think it benefited many in the community. I know the lodging community, the dining community, you know, certainly saw benefits out of that. But it's a balance. You don't want too much. It's not easy to totally control. You know, I'd kind of like to grow more on midweek, non-holiday, not necessarily on the busiest days. You can do that through pricing. You can do it through other means. But I think we're very fortunate here at Sugarbush versus Stowe. Our lift capacity moves about 24,500 people per hour, or 16 lifts. Stowe moves about 14,000, 15,000. We've anticipated parking, so we have not run out of parking, and I don't want to run out of parking. So we do get full sometimes at Lincoln Peak, move people to Mount Ellen, vice versa, but we have not run out of parking ever. We built a new parking lot down by the Warren House that has taken some overflow. The other thing we have, which is we didn't create, it just happens, we have 3 ways into the resort instead of just one way up the access road. So you can access it through the Sugarbush Access Road, through West Hill Road, through Route 17, and across German Flats. And that allows a very, very different traffic flow. So yes, we're mindful, and I'm not going to guarantee that we won't get crowded. Even last year, there was a line going back to the Sugarbush Inn a couple of days, but it wasn't a 2.5-hour, 3-hour line. It was more like what, Margot, 15, 20, most. So anyway, I do hope we grow, but I also hope we grow responsibly. Anybody else? And I do appreciate the kind words from Bob last night, from Mad River Glen, from Eric Friedman, and then maybe the person that knew more than anybody else was Chan Weller, who was the first marketing director at Sugarbush, who actually knows the ski industry very well. And he was very complimentary about the Alterra people, as are most people in this industry. So I feel bittersweet, but I also feel confident that this is the right decision for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Wynn. Oh, great. And I'm going to pass it over to Katie. It should just be... Oh, wow.
Hello. My name is Katie Gallagher, and I am the relatively new community planner with the Planning District. And I'm going to be talking to you about our 2019 annual data report. So I hope you like data. So this report is produced annually to fulfill our requirements in the 1998 MOU, but it also is a really great resource in providing community-wide data and information for planning and community use. And it's mainly pulled together using publicly available data, but also it took a lot of information from local organizations and agencies and couldn't have been done without their support. And so this presentation is just a very small snippet from the larger report, which is going to be, or is already available on our website, and we also have some paper copies. So this is the MRV vision statement, which Bob already went over, so I'm not going to read it, but I just wanted to note that this and future data reports are really aiming to build off of this vision statement to make sure that we are actually talking about and measuring information that is relevant to the whole Valley community. And so this presentation is organized into 3 main data themes based off of the vision statement: community, economy, and environment and land use. And as we go through each of these themes, I just note that all of them are really interconnected, and so that's really important. So starting off with community and looking at our population, we know that the MRV had a pretty significant population surge leading up until about the 2000s that really bucked regional trends. But since about 2010, the population has remained pretty steady, and that's consistent with our neighbors as well. Breaking the population down by age group, we see that since 2010, the MRV has been losing folks under the age of 35 and gaining a lot of folks above age 60. And the median age in the Valley is older than that of the state, and it's a lot older than the rest of the United States as a whole. School enrollment can be a really useful indicator for population trends. And so just a note here that the number of grades between elementary, middle, and high schools is different, so we're looking at trend lines and not the total number here. But looking at Harwood Unified Union School District, elementary and middle schools have been pretty consistent, looking back to 2009. The high school enrollment has decreased since 2009. It's been about 25%, so it's a decrease of 10% overall. But again, this is pretty on par with the rest of the state. So one challenge that Bob noted is housing. Housing availability and accessibility is a challenge throughout the state, and it's no different here. The majority of the Valley's housing stock is seasonal, recreational, or occasional use, and we know from more recent data that that hasn't really changed recently. The most recent data we have from 2017 shows that we only added 18 owner-occupied or rental units compared to 51 occasional use units. And I just wanted to know, it's not explicitly in this chart, but of increasing relevance is the number of short-term rental units, such as Airbnb and HomeAway, those kinds of things. Warren and Waitsfield are among the top 15 towns in the state with the most amount of short-term rentals. And it's right now about 500 between the two towns. The median sales price of primary residences can show both the health of the housing market and also comparative values. So we see here that home values for primary residences has leveled out post-recession, but they're generally still higher than the county as a whole. Warren is closer to Washington County level, but we also know that Warren has a lot of condos that can impact that. The median value of owner-occupied units are significantly higher than those median sales prices that were on the last slide, although they're not necessarily single-family homes. So there's a bit of a difference, but we still see that the median value of these units is significantly higher than Washington County. So housing availability poses a big challenge for local businesses and employees. The percentage of Sugarbush, using this as an example, employees residing within the valley decreased in 2007 from about 56% to about 49% in 2018-2019. So changes in median gross rents have not really been consistent. This is looking from the year 2000 to 2017. A little bit different between the three towns, and this is compared to Washington County on the left, but they in general are still higher than Washington County, which has remained pretty stable since 2010, whereas Waitsfield, Warren, and Fayston are kind of going up and down. So to put housing costs in perspective, I wanted to show this. This is looking at the median gross rents for 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms compared to the Washington County fair market rent on the left-hand side with the lines going across, so you can kind of hopefully easily make that comparison. The fair market rent is the 40th percentile of gross rents for typical non-substandard rental units in Washington County. We know that rents in Washington County versus the Valley aren't exactly the same, so this isn't a perfect comparison, but I think it still provides a useful contrast. So looking at the economy, we have a strong diversity of businesses with construction, leisure and hospitality, and professional and business services being the highest number of businesses that we have here. In 2018, we had a number of increases in the number of businesses in the sectors with those pluses on top, and the majority of our businesses we know are based in the town of Waitsfield. However, as you can see, a lot of these valley-based jobs are in leisure and hospitality, which is probably not a surprise. But we have also gained jobs in the past year in agriculture, construction, public administration, leisure and hospitality, professional and business services, and other services. And just a note, the prevalence of Sugarbush, while Warren only has 26% of businesses, it accounts for about 40% of total jobs in the valley. So this is using Waitsfield as representative of the rest of the valley to look at average annual wage by industry. So you can see that there's variation across the different industries. And while there's no significant increases in wages in 2018, a number of sectors did experience pretty slight increases. And of course, it's important to note here that average wages are affected by the proportion of seasonal and part-time jobs. So to put wages in perspective in terms of living costs, this is looking again at the Waitsfield average annual wage compared to the 2018 Washington County housing wage, which is defined on the right here, but is essentially how much you would need to earn while working full-time in order to be able to afford a home priced at the fair market rate, while paying no more than 30% of your income. So there is a fair amount of flow in and out of the valley of people primarily leaving and going, or coming and going because of employment purposes. And just to note that worker flow has really broad implications, including impacts on local businesses, on infrastructure, on the environment. But here, the majority of those who work in the valley are commuting in, and this has been increasing. Right now, it's almost 60%. And another increasing figure has been the number of folks who work in the valley who live in the valley are working from home. And in 2017, 17% of valley workers worked from home. So this is a follow-up on Jamie's presentation. This is the MRV bus ridership from 2003 when it began to 2019, last season. Since the beginning of the winter bus service, ridership has been pretty steady, averaging around 55,000, and there hasn't been too much change in that. That's the hope. Yes, that will, right.
The numbers have been difficult.
Right.
But with, I think with these new rider programs they have,
yeah,
we
so
should get better data.
You can see in the past couple of years, numbers haven't been great, and that's despite increasing skier visitation, so we would expect that that wasn't the case, and we know that data quality might not have been 100%, but they're going to be improving that, which is really exciting. So this is looking at meals, rooms, and alcohol tax receipts. In 2018, we continued to see slight increases in all three sources. And just a note that because Fayston doesn't meet the threshold in terms of the number of establishments it has for the state's confidentiality threshold, alcohol and rooms taxes are just representing Warren and Waitsfield. So one thing I wanted to note is that while alcohol only increased by 2%, in Waitsfield it increased by 9%, and it accounted for that majority of that increase. And then just to look back a little bit further to 2009, this is showing the same numbers. But just to note that those increases have been pretty significant since 2009, where, again, Waitsfield has seen really big increases, particularly in alcohol, but in all three sectors.
Have we seen increases in rooms tax? I mean, they don't have I can't imagine. They don't have the bed base for rentals as compared to Warren's. Airbnb. The Airbnb is, have we gotten anybody, Peter? Where's Peter McLaren? How is the state reporting that?
They don't break it out, so we don't.
Right. So they only know that in the state of Vermont that they've collected X number of dollars.
Yeah.
They haven't allocated it by community yet.
As far as we know.
So we don't know what the impact of Airbnb is. But So that's why I'm questioning if, that Waitsfield, if Waitsfield's number is going up, I don't understand where the bed base is.
So Katie, though, in the previous slide where you said, was it 470, 490, were the short-term rentals for Waitsfield and Warren? Is that just Airbnb, or is that all short-term rentals?
All short-term rentals.
Okay, that
But
seems
again,
low.
Airbnb's not in there.
Well,
I think it is in
in
there.
the 490. In the 490.
Oh,
In the 490.
the 490 is the number of units.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I get that, but that's not in this number.
Right, but doesn't 490 seem too low for Waitsfield and Warren? For all rental
For
beds or
Airbnb?
units?
Airbnb?
No, it's everything.
No, that's just Airbnb. The 490 was just
Airbnb, home away.
Is that
Is
that
that
490?
490?
Oh, okay.
It's
sorry.
just
Airbnb. Yeah.
All of the
Yeah.
short-term rental
Short-term rental.
sites.
Yeah, there's actually a website now.
Yeah.
You can go on it, it shows you all the Airbnb VRBOs by town.
Yep, and that's,
But unfortunately, it changes. I mean, people can put their unit in,
Right.
take it out, put it
It's in and out.
So it's like, okay,
It
how do
shows
I
who's
monitor
ever
this to
current,
say,
yeah.
what
It's a
the
snapshot.
number is?
well, and there's also the difference, of course, between people who are using them. You might rent out a room for Airbnb for 1 week a year versus that being the full-time use of that unit. So it's hard to account for those differences.
Our rental units, our employee rental units? Because that's actually become a fairly significant number. We have 130 beds that we either own or we're renting and then, renting to employees.
Well, I can answer that for you, Wayne. I mean, I'll ask it by a question. Are you paying rooms tax on top of them? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I think
It's over
that,
30 days.
Huh?
It's a long-term rental, it's over 30 days.
Okay, so
He's
they're
doing-
so
he's
they're
doing
not,
long-term
so
rental.
you're not picking those up.
It's a long-term rental.
So those
you're
are
not
not-
picking it up, yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
But what it does do is it impacts the affordability that you raised, because the maximum percentage that any of our employees pays, the maximum if they're at minimum wage, is 25%. So the vast majority of people are paying under 25%, which is very affordable.
Right.
Numbers just raise questions.
I know.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, so this is just comparing the meals, rooms, and alcohol tax receipts to Montpelier and Waterbury and shows that we are doing relatively well outside of the valley. This is breaking it down by quarter because the first quarter is, generally the winter months where we see more volatility. The third quarter is the bottom line, July through September, which has been increasing since 2009. They have increased about 30%, which is good for us. So this is looking at gross receipts, which include taxable and non-taxable sales. It's interesting that while Waitsfield has experienced increasing meals, rooms, and alcohol tax receipts, gross sales and retail have been decreasing since 2005. But this graph still shows that Waitsfield remains by far the commercial center of the valley, as it accounts for almost 70% of the total gross receipts of the three towns.
What business is that? That's gross receipts by town going down. That's just not anything that isn't.
It's everything. So it's pretty much all of the sales within the municipality.
All sales that are taxable.
And non-taxable.
And non, okay.
Yes.
So groceries, clothing,
Yeah, okay.
hardware.
But not alcohol and.
Nope.
No.
All right, I get it. Okay. Huh.
The grand lists in the three towns have been relatively stable. This is looking back towards 2009. And recreation represents a really critical part of our economy. Visits to Sugarbush over the past season increased by 9%. And while not in our MOU, Mount River Glen also has reported their data, and at a much different scale, they also experienced similar increases in the past year. Efforts to expand outdoor recreation opportunities include new trailhead kiosk signs, which we'll be talking about more. But we can see this is looking at 2016 and 2018 data that there have been increases already to trails throughout the valley, and we're going to be continuing to monitor these counts on a 2-year basis. And now moving into energy. So electrical consumption in the valley as a whole has decreased by almost 8% between 2016 and 2018. And a bulk of that came from a 32% reduction in commercial consumption from Warren alone. And this graph is showing the monthly peak demand at Sugarbush between 2014 and 2019 from November to March. Because of a number of energy efficiency upgrades that Sugarbush has made, they have decreased their total energy usage by 42% since 2002.
The other day, meeting with Green Mountain Power, and they showed us that our peak demand used to be 12 megs, and last year our peak demand day was 7, so that was a shedding of 5 megs.
It's pretty incredible.
Megawatts.
So E. coli is an indicator of the overall health of surface waters, particularly those that are used for recreation. And so I'm not sure if you can read the top level, that's the state health protective level for recreational water. And while it looks like our E. coli levels are doing super well, it is worth noting that E. coli levels are dependent on environmental factors at the moment of sample collection. And 2019 levels, for example, are low in part because they were not captured on high flow water days. And long-term monitoring by Friends of the Mad River and Corey suggest that there are challenges at particular locations with stormwater runoff and pollution. And the valley has a long history of participating in land conservation efforts, which has resulted in about 23% of the total acreage of the 3 towns being conserved. You can see the majority of that is state or federally conserved. And in 2019, an additional 4 acres were added to previously conserved property to facilitate the transfer of land to new farmers. And that is just a small portion of all of my data, but I would love to talk more about all of it or a small portion of it with anybody at any other point. So if you would like to follow up with me, I would be happy to talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Katie, I'm curious, what portion of that 43% drop in retail in Waitsfield over the past 5 or 10 years?
15, 14.
15 years? How much of that is attributable to Amazon.com and to box stores? Do we have any idea?
That's a great question, and I don't know.
And what portion of the retail is hard goods versus groceries, et cetera?
Yeah. So the gross receipts I know that are reported by the businesses. So I'm not sure if I went and talked to the Department of Taxes, which is one of my goals, if they would be able to provide that information, but I think that that's a really great question. Yeah, that's definitely something worth.
Amazon now is reporting their sales by zip code.
Yeah.
So those taxes,
You could include that.
those would be, those should be included. I mean,
Yeah.
if the state. But what's 2018? I don't know, Jared, that's a big ask. We've asked that question before. I think, Don, didn't you try and reach out and get that information from the tax department? And you got shut down, right? Yeah. You get very little data from Montpelier.
Any other questions?
Well, I want to ask a question of Win Smith because he's still here, and I meant to ask the question earlier. In your presentation, you talked about the higher cost structure of doing business in Vermont. And I think it'd be, from your perspective, enlightening to hear what those top 3 factors are.
Yeah. I mean, it's the given reality, and, little things like if you buy equipment, we pay 6% sales tax. Other states, exempt certain equipment. Obviously, we know property taxes are higher. Workers' comp is relatively higher. It's a tough state to insure. We essentially have had one company willing to insure us. Last year, they were going to bump our premium by $500,000 from $800,000 to $1.3 million. We found a new carrier that's just entered the ski business, and that's always kind of risky to go with them. But for $500,000, we went with them. So being part of the Altera company, they have a bigger pool. Someday they may be self-insured. So, we could see our workers' comp maybe go from $800,000 to $400,000, that kind of magnitude. So those are just, a couple of examples. And I think the other thing is everybody's facing labor shortages, but, effectively we have 0 unemployment in a ski town like this. 4 years ago, we hired no international students. We prefer to hire locally. We could not run the business without the J1 students. This year we will have 120 of them. And they're not cheaper labor. They get paid the same wage rate. We have to find housing, which adds to the cost. We have to have transportation because they don't have licenses. I have a full-time chaperone now, so I've added a full-time employee to supervise them. But, that's the given reality. So it's happening across the states, plural, but it's acute in Vermont. It's even more acute in Vermont. So those are just some of the factors, Jared.
Thank you.
We are caught up on time. So thank you very much, Katie. And we have 2 more presentations to go. I'm going to just minimize that. And I'm going to request the Madrid Valley Recreation District to come up and share their story of what they've been doing for the last year. So I'll pass it to you, Liza. Left and right.
Okay.
And we do have 2 microphones, so one that's wired and one that is wireless. So feel free to use both, and they're both on.
Good evening. We're the Recreation District. We should have everyone stand up and do jumping jacks at this point in the evening, but I'll spare you that. I'm Liza Walker. I'm chair of the Recreation District, and I've got Alice Rogers and Mike Nucci here joining me for our annual visit with you. This is just the list of our board members. I think Chrissy's in the back too, Chrissy Billmeyer. Just wanted to first just remind everybody who we are. We're a union municipal district. We were formed in 1994 to provide for the recreation needs of our member towns, which are Warren, Waitsfield, and Fayston. So we have a broad list. The original statement, agreement, which I think Jared signed, said that we could do programming, planning, administration, development, facility development, conservation, and other things like that. So, and maintenance. So we have a lot of things we can do, and we're starting to do more and more. But I just wanted to quickly say our board is really, the state of our board right now is just really exciting. I think we're a really strong board with a lot of different skills and a lot of engagement, and we've been working really hard. So it's just great to be part of this group. As we all know, there's tons of ways to recreate in the valley, more and more every year. It started with probably our long history of hiking and skiing, and it's grown into people inventing new ways to recreate. So we've got lots of different options there. And we also have a ton of recreation partners. There's so much leadership around recreation in the Mad River Valley, from local businesses to nonprofit organizations to volunteer coaches and leading our youth sports. So the challenge for the Recreation District with our original founding goals is sort of what's our role here? What can we do to provide for the recreation needs with so much going on here? And it's really unique to the Mad River Valley to have so much leadership in that way.
So really our goal is to facilitate and enhance opportunities here and find different ways to support all these other leaders so that we can have the greatest outcomes. And it's just great to remember the many reasons why recreation is important, and some of that came up in the data report about the economic benefits of recreation especially. We know there's many, many community benefits. It brings us out on the land together, and we connect with one another in the land, and we find physical health and mental health, and also it really supports our communities. I think the 2014 economic study that the Planning District did found that recreation was one of 4 key sectors of our economy, and certainly at the national level, it's a huge player. I think we spend more on outdoor recreation than we do on gasoline and pharmaceuticals, so that's pretty telling. And in Vermont, certainly it's a huge piece. It's such that Governor Scott, has made it a real priority a couple of years ago to invest in enhancing outdoor recreation with the formation of VOREC, which is the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. So there's just a lot of energy at the state level going into recreation, and then here, as I said, in the valley. And so the data we have is going to expand more and more in the coming years, but we're still looking at the 2016 data that looked at with the Mad River Moves study, and that looked at the user spending or consumer spending related to recreation, and a bunch of it was on trails that the Mad River Riders have developed at Blueberry Lake and at the Revolution Trail, and then also here in Waitsfield Village, the Mad River Path Association's work gets people moving through our village and through our commercial center. So, so we know that recreation is a really important investment. And this is also drawn from our strategic plan, which we did in 2018. And we did some looking at that economic piece just to see where are we in our investment in the valley compared to some of our neighbors. And that was also pretty telling in that we're, for a population of 4,077, we're spending about $9 to, Waterbury, which has more, a little bit greater population, and Stowe, but if you look at the size of the budgets, we're pretty modest comparatively. And a lot of that budget comes from staffing, so most of those towns do have 1 to 3 staff members supporting recreation. And again, they do that because they don't have, in some ways, what we have, which is so much civic engagement around recreation, so much leadership. Those towns are running the camps and they're running the programs, and we're really lucky that we have Sugarbush and Bridges and schools and so many programs. So we aren't the providers of the programs, but there's still a lot that we can be done. So I'm going to pass over to Alice just to look at our strategic plan goals and the way we've invested in recreation in this past year.
So I'm going to be tackling mostly our role in awarding grants, although we have a number of strategic areas in our plan. Grants has traditionally been our area of focus, and I will say that we are changing and growing and expanding in our responsibilities so that the awarding of grants is increasingly, it's only one facet of what we do. But it is a facet that has a lot of impact in the valley, and it wouldn't be possible without the the commitment of the 3 towns, each of which donate to the grants, so that we have $15,000 each, and so we have $45,000 to grant. So I'm not going to talk too long about grants because we really want to elaborate on the growth that we are experiencing and some of the changing dynamics. Chrissy in the back, we do have a handout if you want to pick up and take a look at the summaries of the grants that we awarded this past cycle. They'll be posted in greater detail on our website, but I'm going to go over just a couple of things that I think are noteworthy with regard to our grants. Last year, our last grant cycle, we had 8 organizations requesting grants. Many of them are recurring, but it's noteworthy that 2 of them, Bocce, brand new, and the Warren Skate Park second year. So we're beginning to see some energy around new recreational opportunities. And that's one of the initiatives that we're committed to, largely because we want to see that recreation serves a broad demographic base, and it creates a variety of different kinds of recreation. What is also noteworthy is that our grant awards are fairly evenly distributed. And that hasn't always been the case. We've had times where certain organizations have garnered a lion's share. And this past year, much more evenly distributed among the organizations. And in part, I think that is a function of us constantly revising and reviewing the grant process in an iterative way to make sure that every single organization has equity, there's accountability, and that we can actually maximize the use of funds that come from the 3 towns. So a pretty even distribution of our grants this year. And the way that that's played out, and in kind of an interesting way, is a sneak peek for next year. We went from 8 requests last year, which, by the way, I should also note, of those 8 requests, they totaled, in terms of money between the 8 organizations, they wanted $110,000, which we didn't even have close to the capacity to award, and we granted about a little over $46,000. This year, we have 14 grant applications, and 50% of those are new, 50% are reoccurring. The grant requests have come down. I think everybody has gotten a sense of a little bit more of a tempered realization of what we can and cannot do. And they're all falling primarily within sort of the same range, somewhere between 2,000, and there's still some big asks, but I think everybody kind of has a much more realistic sense of what we can and cannot do. And again, it's nice to see the new organizations as we really strive to diversify our recreational opportunities in the Valley. There's already been some mention of the kiosk program. It's been a project management for the planning district. The recreation district has acted as the fiscal agent. We did end up having from each of the towns $8,500, and that was used and leveraged by the planning district to receive 2 other grants, 2 state grants for about a little over $33,000. And the project sum total is to get 52 kiosks and trailheads into the ground. We are about halfway through, and I think the projection is by the end of next spring that the kiosks will be finished. And I think you've seen them around in the Valley, and again, what we're really striving for as part of the Valley Moves and the idea of an interconnected Valley floor and access is for people to really, it shouldn't be a secret about where those trails are. And if you are down in the Valley floor for Columbus Day weekend, you would have seen just how many people were, they were gathered up in front of the signs, and they were using those, the pathways throughout the Valley. And it was pretty neat to see people walking and parking their cars and leaving them and being able to go from, from the Mad River Green over to the Stadium, over to Lawson's, back across, a lot of walking going on. So it's been a really productive project, and we're looking forward to that completion. But we are expanding, and so with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Mike.
So I'm going to kind of read off my notes here because I want to stay on task. So I'm going to talk about Mad River Park. If you don't know, I'm the Mad River Park Rec Fields Manager. So we had another successful year this year, and although it did come with a few challenges, we had We hosted 2 lacrosse tournaments along with regular scheduled soccer games in the spring. The first tournament, we had well over 1,000 people on the fields. We had cars on both sides of Airport Road. So it was kind of an issue. We weren't really prepared. By the second tournament, we reached out to Cabot, who allowed parking in their lot, and we enlisted some volunteers to help out, and we purchased some signage. And we actually had a food vendor come out on site. So we're kind of still in the learning process with everything we do out there. We realize that using Cabot's not the end-all solution, but it will help on the big days, high-volume days. Administratively, we worked on our policies and procedures, which kind of redefined the roles of my job and the Mad River Park Committee to actually reflect the workflow and streamlined our field rental process. We rewrote all the lease agreements to include some anti-discrimination language, which is a requirement of our state grant. And we came up with a new fee schedule for new and existing users. So we now charge all users a fee now. Historically, we only listed maintenance and portalet rentals as a form of payment. And now we've kind of switched over once we realized what it all takes. So usage. This year we had a slight increase in overall usage. And for paid users, we had additional soccer camp. We also rented field space to Waterbury Youth Soccer during the spring. And we had a family fun event hosted by a church. None of these were real high dollar events, but they did help purchase some supplies for maintenance. In terms of non-paid usage or pickup, we had the standard lunchtime frisbee and adult pickup soccer, but this year we also added weekly youth pickup soccer, which was pretty successful. We usually averaged 10 to 15 kids a week. And we also hosted a youth gear sports swap, where parents could drop off or receive used gear, which we managed to fit about a dozen kids for free. So we're still continuing to look for different opportunities out there, and we'll see if we can make something work for the summer and the winter months as well. So improvements, not a lot this year. We did get some stay mat and picnic table donated by the Hale family. We did our standard fertilization and aerated twice this year, and we applied about 10 yards of topsoil. As some of you may be aware, we received a visit from the fire marshal last year. One of the issues was with the public structure is you have to have ADA accessibility, and our earthen ramp is not currently ADA accessible. So that's one of the things we're kind of working with Kingsbury Construction on. We're on their schedule to get that repaired. So one of our main immediate goal is to continue to focus on improving the playing surface of the fields, and by that, we're going to do more topsoil, more fertilizer, and seed. Long-term goals, we're looking at better bathroom options. Currently, we use portalets out there, and they're not very, they're actually our second highest complaint aside from parking. We're also looking at the possibility of irrigation, but all that was very costly, and we're going to probably have to look at seeking grants for something like that. So earlier this year, I was tasked by the rec board to determine the number of hours a week I spend on the fields. I came up with an average of somewhere around 7 to 10 hours a week. Majority of the time is seasonal, but there's stuff to do even after the snow flies. So my year-round commitment consist of field improvements, rule enforcement, permitting, addressing complaints, policy writing, lease and grant writing, and planning. And there's always more I could do. This year, I only managed to apply for one grant, which we didn't end up getting. It was for the ADA ramp. As the members of the rec board have discussed with select boards, we are requesting a part-time position this year. The positions will be multifaceted. We're going to look at having them be the facility manager for Mad River Park, which is clearly defined in our policies and procedures. And then we're also going to see this position to become the face of recreation. What I mean by that is we want someone out there to give a physical presence for the Mad River Rec District, and someone that can interact with the community. This position will also help ease the volunteer strain for many of these rec organizations in the Valley by helping with registration, scholarships, and coordinating volunteers. And this will also help us further implement our strategic plan. And I'll hand it back to Liza for a little more talk on that.
We really couldn't have gotten through the first couple of years of Mad River Park ownership without Mike. He's been amazing, helping us in so many different ways. So this position is certainly, yay, Mike. Every time we think he's burning out, we start working harder on our job description. So certainly the facilities management is a part of it, is a part of the work. And I should mention, we've talked to you all in the past couple of weeks about Couples Field, and we just learned that their plans have changed, actually, that they wish to hold on to Couples Field, and they're re-energizing their nonprofit organization, which we think is great news. We were, going to certainly rise to the task of taking over Couples if that was needed, but so that's no longer what we're planning on right now. So that's a change since we last saw you. But again, we think it's great news that that this community has so many volunteers and that more people are stepping up to carry that place. So, but we still feel like there's still a real role for facilities management help, and then doing so many other things we want to do to achieve our strategic plan, which we're just a couple years into our 5-year plan. And again, the way I was speaking before, there's a lot of leadership in this community for recreation, so we feel like we can help in the role of coordinating. The planning district has been carrying a lot of water with recreation the past year or 2 or 3 or 10, and that's something we want to step up to carry more of that, and co-hosting the next Trails Collaborative meeting with the riders and the path, and queuing up the next projects that we can all do. So we have a drafted job description that's on the table. We'll probably can make it available on our website too. And I guess I would just say it's a work in progress. We want to make the request now for the funding to do this, and then we're really digging into what that looks like with a steep learning curve with what it would mean to have an employee. We're working with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which we're becoming a new member of this year, so we can get our own guidance. So anyway, but we'll look forward to any guidance and advice you have on that position. Doug Bergstein is our treasurer. He's not here tonight, so I'm going to have to stand in and just give you a sense of where we're at. Basically, we have maintained sort of 3 pots of money. The kiosk project, as we said, we were the fiscal agent for that. We're down to just about $3,500 left in that account, and that's going to be used up this spring when that project wraps up. Mad River Park, some of that we had a separate fund. Well, we want to track that, but we did have money left over from our fundraising when we acquired the land a couple years ago. So some of that's where the balance comes from. So we have about $8,600 in there now. That'll be used up quickly for this ADA ramp that we need to build, so we can provide good access down to the pavilion and the fields. And then the recreation, our main pool of money, we have an ending balance of about $12,887 as of this week. So some of that's, you can see a couple holes in, like next to the stadium. We actually granted them some money, and they didn't claim it yet. Maybe this is when they start kicking into action for the coming season. So If that's not claimed soon with receipts, then we will just reallocate it towards the next round of grants. So what we're here tonight is to ask what we want to request for a budget at the town meeting this year. And we're basically doubling what we usually ask for from each town, which has been $15,000. This year, we'd like to ask each town for $90,000, and this sort of shows how we'd spend it with our different needs. We're allocating about $45,000 to the staff position. We think it'll be a part-time, 24 to 32 hours, and then we know there's all sorts of associated costs that we have to work out from the taxes and where this person will sit and what they're going to type into and all that. So that's kind of our allocation at this time. And then the grant program. So as you saw, we have about $79,000 in requests for grants this year. So we are pinched to do everything we want to do. We're hoping with the staff position we can do more to seek funds outside of the valley to cultivate more volunteerism and support maintenance and sustainability of all our resources. So that's our request. I think that's that's the official request. So that's the last slide, and just wanted to open it up to any questions. Thanking you in advance for your support, and we felt that coming forward tonight, you've urged us to continue to grow and ask for what we need, and so that's what we're doing. So we appreciate that, but we open it up to any thoughts or questions.
I don't have a question. I just want to mention that because one of the other hats I wear in this state, I interface with many other soccer organizations, and they are very envious, for the most part, of Mad River Park. One of the reasons, besides the beautiful layout with all the fields, is the fact that it's built on an old quarry, and when the rain stops, play can begin. Where a lot of fields, especially this last spring, in other towns were unplayable for a long time, and we were playable. So we should be proud of that complex.
Thanks, John. Sorry I didn't recognize John Stokes earlier. He's our long-tenured member of the rec district. We really appreciate his insights and his long history of coaching. And yeah, Mad River Park, we're really lucky to have it.
So to be clear, Liza, you are asked, the ask is $30,000 per town.
That's right. Yep.
There's a lot of silence over
There is a lot of silence. Is that good news?
I don't know what the silence. Tony, it doesn't work. Well, I mean, you gave it to me. I thought I'd use it. I don't know why the silence, but for one selectman, I'll say, God bless you, thank you, and I think this is great. You're taking the steps that need to be done. And the ROI on $30,000 will come back to the towns manyfold.
I'll second Mr. Ackland, and I think that unless we've had our head in the sand, we've been expecting this come year, and here it is.
Thanks, that's great to hear. And I will add, just again, we want to be doing more, connecting more in the coming months as we're planning for the staff position and looking at where there's synergies with other organizations that have half-time staff or need some facility maintenance for recreation or who knows what. So we're really, while we have a good draft job description, we'd love feedback.
A parent of 2 teenagers and a recreator myself, my family has benefited from the rec district, certainly from Mad River Park. I have one very passionate soccer player and lacrosse player, and it wouldn't have happened without the Mad River Park and the clubs that the park hosts. As a mountain biker, the trails in the valley are phenomenal, and the work that has happened in the last 10 years is incredible. We're really lucky to have the rec district and all those partners facilitating that work. And $90,000 is not a lot of money.
Yeah, especially.
Should we make it 110?
I think we have to think about the multiple bottom lines here, the bottom lines of our involving our youth and engaging our youth in passions, but just ask somebody in Stowe what the lacrosse tournament brings into that community for revenue, and the mountain bike festivals that we had here that plays off the trail network that we built. So it's a revenue generator as well as fulfilling needs for our kids and residents.
I'd like to add, as a parent and resident who interacts with a lot of people with little kids or new parents, the frustration at never knowing how to contact, where does my kid take swim lessons, and the prospect of having a central person that you can direct them to is really exciting to me. And I feel like that I've missed that as well as a parent. Like, I don't know who to call, and why are there 5 different organizations that are doing all these different things? So this is
Right. I don't even think I really mentioned that effectively, but that's one thing that we want to do better, since there are so many leaders. We want to help be a clearinghouse, and we have been changing our website, updating it. It hasn't been unveiled yet, but that's the place you could go to one website and see what are all the things you can do here. And we also, by having a recreation coordinator, when it's time to register for soccer, having a real visible signs up and maybe a place you can go in to get help to do that. So we know a lot of people miss deadlines because they didn't know they were there, and then they can't play, and that shouldn't happen. So,
And an additional role of that staff person would be to help write grants and bring in more funding. And so I don't know, John, how much, Mad River Riders, what do you guys do for grants? How much do you bring in? And I know you spend a lot of time.
80,000 a year.
How much?
80,000 a year.
Yeah,
on
and
average, last 5
the
years.
amount of time and energy that goes
Takes a lot of work
in.
to get that 80,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and a lot of
Yeah.
expertise, and we're hoping to have someone with us that can help support everyone else. There's no question that the organizations, the recreation organizations, work incredibly hard off the backs and labor of volunteers. And despite that, there is, Mike undersold how much time he spent. He was not at all clear. But if you think about the organizations, and you go to any one of the rec organizations and you ask them about their volunteer base and how many hours they put in, and all of it is generative of extended and expanded recreational opportunities. So you guys added, 3 miles to your 53 miles. The Mad River Path is adding to the trails. I think we're at, between the Ridge Riders, the snowmobile guys, riders, and Mad River Path, we have about 140 miles of trails in this valley, and the stewardship of those trails has really come down to the work of the volunteers and the organizations. And we actually think that there could be a lot more synergy and efficiency if we have a staff person who can even do more to help coordinate, because that's where their dedicated focus is. And despite the fact that we are a strong board, we are a board of volunteers, and so there is a limited amount of time to be able to get those things done. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and Alice, not to correct you, I actually just did an analysis last week on our GIS files of our trails. We actually have 180 miles of trails in Matter Valley.
I haven't calculated the acres of playing fields.
Yeah. So thank you all. So we're in our less than half hour, and I am going to be the last presenter, and my presentation is right here. So thank you all for being here this evening. I want to share my appreciation for your time and dedication, and appreciation to MRV TV for live streaming and recording this meeting. who supported us in some of the costs of the food, to them, and a great community partner. I also want to let you know we have a sign-in sheet. There's actually two. There was one over here, and there's another on the table back there. And we're right here. So please do put your name down. This is an official meeting of the Plain District, so we'd like to record who's here. And as stated before, the presentations from this evening will be on the Plain District website, in addition to the minutes of this meeting, and thank you to Katie for taking those. So my job here is to talk about the Planning District, the entity that served as the host for this evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, a little bit about what we've been doing, specifically on the staff level, and what we're looking at in the new year. And I think it's really appropriate, and I appreciate all the presenters and those who put the time in advance as we really bring these threads of transit and recreation and economy and environment. These are all very important key pieces of our community. And the Planning District was given a charge in 1985 in our Articles of Agreement. So 35 years ago, this upcoming year, to carry out a program of planning for the future of the Mad River Valley directed towards its physical, social, economic, fiscal, environmental, cultural, and aesthetic well-being of the towns of Waitsfield, Warren, Fayston, and their inhabitants. I don't think they left much out. It's a pretty big charge, but it's a tremendous responsibility and opportunity for our community. That work and the way in which we work is in these circles around here. At the very top is professional planning, the grants, awareness, implementation, coordination, and leadership. So we play a variety of different roles within the towns, and we have a steering committee. Bob Acklin, who started off the meeting, is the chair, and we have representatives from each of the select boards and planning commissions of the towns of Waitsfield, Warren, and Fayston. We also have representation from Sugarbush, from Mad River Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission in an ex officio non-voting manner. So that's the steering committee that Katie and I answer to, meet in a monthly setting, and our office is right next door. So what have we been doing with that big charge in the last year? A variety of different things, and really a little bit in each of those. But these are the ones I just want to highlight. And I'm not going to get into data because I think Katie did a great job. So as she said, as a plug, the data report is on the Plain District website. We have a handful of printed copies. So there are 2 or 3, actually a total of 4 per town of those 3 towns, and a handful of additional ones. So if anyone would prefer a paper copy outside of the municipalities, please let us know, and we do have a couple copies, and not a whole lot. But so let me jump right into transportation. And I'm not going to go over too much of what Jamie had shared before, but the Planning District serves this role, and we've been doing some infrastructure improvement support, specifically in the last year. The town of Waitsfield, with urging and support from the Mad River Path Association, and the Plain District supporting, working on a official crosswalk at the Carroll Road across Route 100. That's what Alice was talking about previously. And as well, in supporting sidewalks and other infrastructure projects in the municipalities. In addition, there's the Mad Bus schedule and the alignment of that. So I also had the privilege of riding on the bus to try to figure out the right way for the bus to go through the shopping center, and finding out that that's too narrow. And together we found solutions, and again, a lot of credit to Alice.
It really was a matter of peeling back confusion and getting Tom Barnes from GMT to go, I think we can straighten this out.
And so having fresh perspective, and putting the time and energy into finding a solution that increases the relevance and ridership of the bus. And I'm really excited to see what comes of this year and hope that those numbers continue to go up. Also in the last year, the Plain District provided some specific grant support for electric vehicle charging stations. There are 2 in Warren, now at the East Warren Community Market, as well as the Warren Municipal Office, and a lot of leadership from the Planning Commission in Warren, but support on some of the grant writing and the work to get that, and they're installed in those locations. And Mad River Taste Place also received an award from the same program. This is state money from the Volkswagen settlement, and the town of Warren, I believe, was earned $33,000 or so, Jim, if my memory serves. And the Taste Place, those are the fast charging, and those are $75,000 grants that were awarded. Those will be installed in the spring. And in addition, Sugarbush also received awards for Mount Ellen this upcoming year, and then had previously at Lincoln Peak. Did I miss any? Okay. So some of the work of the Planning District is listening and supporting the interests and needs. And this was, I mean, in the Warren example, the Planning Commission said, we're really interested in electric vehicle charging stations. What are the opportunities? Exploring those and providing support through the process. In addition, and as Alice had shared before, there's the Madder Valley Transportation Advisory Committee. So it's really a forum to share and recommend planning improvements to the transportation system and expand the decision-making of that work. So together, which meets on the first Wednesday of every month at the General Wade House, a discussion about transportation. Most of the focus in the last couple of years has really been about the Mad Bus, but the decisions and the ideas and the thoughts, like Alice's, as a great example, is she and her husband saying, hey, there's got to be a better way, and working together to find that. And I really, really do appreciate the community engagement to allow those perspectives and the work to get those things done. A lot of those infrastructure improvements that I discussed were also worked through and discussed during those meetings, and other community initiatives. About a year ago, or a little over a year ago, the Madder Valley TAC meeting happened at the Senior Center, and we had that meeting specifically to understand the needs of the senior community and explore options and see if we can come up with solutions together. And the freewheeling project was brought up as a concept at that time, and it's tremendous to see the success it's had getting started this past summer. There's a lot of great ways that things are moving forward. The line between transportation and recreation, specifically in the terminology active transportation, is pretty close. Active transportation is identified as the non-motorized way to get around. And as mentioned by Liza, there was the Madder Valley Active Transportation Plan, which we completed in 2016 with some grant support and a consultant. And the purpose was to identify a watershed-wide, long-range vision for ways to get around the Madder Valley without vehicles. So it builds on and brings together decades of projects and organizations that have been doing this work, helps create a framework, and identifies future opportunities. There are all sorts of recommendations that came out of that. This is a short summary. But in the last year, really in the last couple of years, we've really focused on these streetscape improvements and complete streets work, as well as the designation of the active transportation system. So together, we had a discussion in 2017 of many of the players in this realm and said, what type of projects do we want to work on? And the overwhelming interest was having unified signage and wayfinding, having consistent mapping, and making it less confusing and easier for people to utilize the system. So out of that work came the Madder Valley Unified Trailhead Kiosk and Mapping Project, spare you the acronym. But the intention was to do those three things I just mentioned. And the products of that work is a unified trailhead kiosk system, 52 to be exact, creating an updated paper map of trails in the valley, and having an easy-to-use updated digital map. So together, we have 18 or so, 18 plus trail and conservation organizations in the valley, many of which binding together in a dialogue to figure out how to do this work. But with the Recreation District as a fiscal agent and the support from the towns of Waitsfield, Warren, and Faison of $8,500, we seeded this work and got it rolling. In addition, the Plain District applied for and received $33,000 in grants and lots of volunteer hours to make this work happen. The Plain District has, I specifically have served the role as project manager. This work has been going on for about 18 months, almost 20 months now. But it started with getting together and figuring out a design of kiosks, identifying where they should go. And as we kept on rolling, actually building trailhead kiosks with volunteers. There's Liza up top, doing the work, installing them. And at this point, there are 32 trailhead kiosks in the ground across the system. There are 20 more currently in design to be finished by the beginning of next year, and that 20 to be installed when the ground thaws in the spring. This is a huge moment and a milestone. I think this project is signage, but it's more than that. It's celebration of our recreation resources. It's being welcoming to our community on how to utilize these. And it's speaking in one voice together. It's recognizing all the different organizations. Their logos are on there. The lead trail stewards are on there. But there's consistency in the language, and that was identified in the plan and of interest of the trail partners. So in addition to the kiosks, the two other products is an updated trail map. So the Madrid Valley Trail Map, there's copies in the back. This is a private company that we worked with named Map Adventures, but through the project, we at the community have 1,000 of these, and they've been, about 800 of them have been distributed through the municipal town offices in Waitsfield, Warren, Faison, and Moortown, as well as the libraries in those towns as well. So these are made available to the community. They're also available for sale for $9.95, but 1,000 of them were made available for the community, and that access of our resources was one of the goals. I should also say that the town of Moortown, while not part of the original $8,500 times 3 that was invested into the project, they have since made a contribution of $1,000 towards the project. And so I think that that's a tremendous, I think you are the representative here, John, from the town of Moortown. And this working together and celebrating our resources is really exciting. And there's a lot of leadership in the town of Moortown that helped make that happen. But John, he was the elected person. And John on the Recreation Committee, who's been working at this for a very long time, John Atkinson, this type of leadership to work together is really exciting. So thank you both, and broadly to the town of Moortown.
Very lucky to have John.
Without a doubt. I knew you'd be smiling at me when I looked over there, John. So in addition to the paper map, that's how we knew 180 miles of trails. We created mapping with all the different, utilizing the work of the different trail organizations, and are working and collaborating with Trailfinder. Trailfinder.info is a free online mapping tool that was created over 10 years ago, and Trailfinder.info is specifically for the state of Vermont and the state of New Hampshire. So it has state funding and support and organizational funding, and they are in the process of re-releasing or creating a new version by the beginning of next year. And all of the trail data that's on the maps and on the kiosks are also there. So I'm going to jump quickly to housing as another topic area. Historic work in 2017, the Plain District did a housing study. We identified, our charge was to put our arms around housing and understand the situation. There's an overview document and a longer, more full document. And to move that work from a study to action, one of the important partners is the Madrid Valley Housing Coalition. The Housing Coalition is a standalone nonprofit, but up into about a year or so ago, it had become less active. So the Planning District worked to support and rebuild the Housing Coalition and provide support for creating a board of directors, which are listed on the right. Carl Klein, as Bob had stated before, is the chair. That group is meeting the third Wednesday of the month at the Waitsfield Town Office. Am I correct, Don? And the work so far has been organizing, meeting with housing partners like Downstreet to understand the landscape, working on a work plan, and preparing for a housing summit in the spring of 2020. So there's some really exciting work going on in that realm. In addition, as Bob had stated, there was a Matter Valley housing demand and market analysis. We had this study that was done in 2017, and it was really great in putting our arms around and understanding the role and some of the barriers related to housing, but it didn't go so far as to help us assess the present and future unmet housing demand based on supply and demand factors. And if we're going to make a dent, or if there's interest in moving the needle, having some more granular data and understanding is needed in order to make these types of decisions and policy alternatives and development initiatives. So the planning district put in half the funding to hire Doug Kennedy with $1,000 each from the towns of Warren, Facein, and Waitsfield. This work started in this past summer. We are looking at a final report in December with a presentation as part of this summit in the spring. But what I do have, even though Doug was not able to be here, I have 4 slides of the demand and market analysis, 2 of which that are graphs and 2 others. So the first one here is looking at the demographic realities. And this is a 5-year projection looking at this home market of Waitsfield, Warren, and Facein, the primary housing market that's being studied. And if nothing happens to ongoing trends, this is looking at what's going to happen to households in the area. And this is broken into 3 different groups. There's younger households, mid-age households, and older households. I can get into the details of that. And there's also lower, moderate, and higher incomes. And what this is showing that without any changes, the projected change in the number of households by age and income is older. It's also in the higher income piece. The projected change is essentially flatlined for younger households, but older households, that's where the change is. And that's not, this is reinforced what was in the data report. We have an old population, and it is getting older. But while that looks at the households, this looks at the market realities of who is moving. So this is households seeking new homes by age and income. So again, we have the same groups: younger households on the left, mid-age households in the middle, older households on the right-hand side, and then lower, moderate, and higher from left to right in each of those categories. So this looks at, in the next 12 months, these are the people that will be in the housing market. And what we see is a lot of mobility in the younger households, and a fair amount of mobility on the lower and moderate as well, and less mobility on the older segment. Again, probably not very surprising. Younger people move more than those that are older. But what we also know is that we have a constriction of the market in the lower and moderate categories, and a greater amount of housing available on the higher end. So there's a mismatch between those that are looking and what is available. So in addition to doing a analytical analysis, a quantitative analysis of data, this work is also including a survey, a survey that was primarily focused on employers. There were 57 respondents and 21 in addition from the more general population. And the survey work that Doug went through essentially reinforced a lot of what we already knew, that employers have strong concerns regarding housing. 83% say lack of housing has an effect on the ability to hire. He also said that the vast majority of the employees who filled out the survey and that he's had follow-up conversations with also are engaged in the process of assisting their employees in finding housing. Some of that's in a financial way, sometimes in the search of a variety of ways. Second, the respondents say that the most critical housing issues are both shortage of rental housing in the Valley and the price of ownership too high for the Valley employees. So that, again, not entirely surprising, reinforced by the data as well. And the third, that the respondents say that the development priorities are both home ownership for first-time home buyers and affordable below-market rentals. So that is essentially surveys that reinforce a lot of what's already in the data. And the last slide I want to share is saying, based on the demographic realities, clearly seeing that there is a growth in the population for the older segment of the population. That will continue to grow, and there is a mismatch between the type of housing that's available and those in that market are looking for. Single floor, smaller units, there is an opportunity there related to housing. As well as rental, and that a good amount of that is in the rental side, and some of which is tax credit, and some if there are subsidies if available. So this is the type of housing that the data is showing that there's a market for. The second is looking at the workforce rental piece and looking at mixed income, both between tax credit up to 120% of median income. So essentially, the greatest need is kind of at and right above tax credit and right below where the market is on the rental side, and also fairly similar with the ownership piece. On the ownership side, most projects that seem logical for the Mad River Valley are on the smaller pace, in the 4 or so moderate units annually. So again, smaller units, smaller pace. So this is some of the initial data from Doug Kennedy, which will be available in printed form this December. And the plan is to distribute that and make it available through the planning district, copies to each of the towns. And again, greatly appreciate their support in this work. And then a full presentation as part of a larger summit in the spring. Few more slides and then I will be done. One, I wanted to speak to the work of the planning district. One of those circles before that I said about the planning district is related to grant funding. And these are, we've been tracking the grants for which we are either the applicant for, providing grant writing support or other support in getting grants from outside of the Mad River Valley. From 2009 to 2019, there's $179,000 brought in 2019, and over this 11-year period is $3.7 million to the Mad River Valley. What you see is that there's different colors speaking to different types of grants. In 2013 was a lot related to post-flood and transportation. More recently, we're looking in the realm of recreation, like some of the electric vehicle charging stations, so on and so forth. So that's the grant funding. Looking to the future, the Plain District's fiscal year we have, starts around town meeting day, and for our next year, we're continuing to do a lot of the work that we have been doing, but excited to continue to evolve into other areas. It was stated before the Plain District's been working on recreation for a while. I was thinking as I was sitting there, it's been about 5 years that's been a big part of my job. And the Trail Light Kiosk project has been, for about 2 years, has been a great amount of work and very rewarding. But we're looking at our partners to evolve that conversation and leadership. So I see more work in the recreation, but the Planning District's involvement changing from a project management place to more support going forward. We also look forward to supporting the Waitsville Planning Commission as it looks at its downtown, Irisville and Waitsville Village. That's on their docket for the next year. But we're not quite done with signs, and Cindy's here. So we have a plan, Cindy Jones, on upgrading the Mad River Byway signage and creating consistency between that and the Trail Light Kiosk work that's continued. So the two last slides, the operating expenses of the Planning District. Here we have the approved budget for fiscal year 2020 and the actual budget, or the projected actual for this year. We're a little bit high, but we also received some grant funds on the Trail Light Kiosk project, so it evens out in looking at the proposed budget for the new year. And our funding is in equal portions between the towns of Waitsville, Warren, and Fayston, and Sugarbush. And the request for this year is an increase of 3% over the previous year. And also listed here is other revenue, that being some of the grants that have come in for this year. But we see a total being lower because of other revenue not included, so we're looking at being operated entirely by those 4 portions. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity, again, to share this work. This is my 12th year hosting, supporting the Plan District and hosting this event, and it's a tremendous pleasure to be able to play this role and opportunity to support this longstanding history and all the different players that are making the Matter Valley such a special place. Any questions?
Because it's late, I don't dare answer a question. But I do have a statement. In driving around this valley and neighboring valleys, I often see a house that looks like it's condemned. If it was condemned, it should be torn down. But I look at it and say, gee, I keep hearing about housing, but here's an empty house just laying there year after year. And I'm wondering if there's some way to do something about that. I mean, the shell is there, you don't need permit, you don't, you know, it just bugs me. Statement.
Thank you, John. Yeah. I mean, there's a good number specifically related to commercial areas, like downtown Barrie. When I was a planning and zoning director there were buildings that were vacant for year after year after year. And specifically in a downtown setting, that can be quite the challenge. And communities have done some innovative things related to that, but it is definitely a challenge. Out of the housing stock in the Matter Valley, one of the things in the data report, 48%, 47% of the entire Matter Valley housing stock is year-round. And I think that was on the slide before. No other questions? So I'm going to throw it back to you, Bob. We are at 9 o'clock. If there was any other discussion, and you may want to use this microphone, because that one just goes to...
I won't argue with you, Tony. This one does work. So is there any other discussion about any other topic that we brought up over the course of the meeting? If there is none, I will look to my colleagues to the right and left and ask for a motion to adjourn. Or, I said to what did I say? To the right and to the left, I said.
I'll move to adjourn.
Can I have a second? Thank you. John? That be it? All in favor?
All in favor.
Well, let's go home. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.